Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Chet Airliner podcast. This will be a solo episode, as I expect them to be more often than not. I don't have much to say in terms of an intro, so I'll keep this short. Links to download the music from this episode for free are in the description, as always. I certainly welcome any feedback in the comments, or you can email me at chetairliner@gmail.com. If you want to be a future guest on this podcast, just let me know what you'd like to talk about, and we can try to make it work. I've got several ideas for things I want to cover, but I think some of what might make this especially fun for me is to go places with others that I would not have on my own. With that said, let's move along to the main event. I want to talk about Annihilation. Annihilation is a book by American author Jeff Vandermeer. Published in 2014, I first read it in 2017, and I recommend it. I found this book quite randomly when I was searching Reddit of all places. I say it that way because I spend very little time on Reddit. Not because it's bad, but it just isn't something I do. I only mention this to emphasize how much of a chance encounter it was. I was seeking information on the Tanis podcast, which is a podcast put out by the Public Radio Alliance, the people that bring us rabbits. In a Tanis thread on Reddit, there were a few people that were saying that Tanis seems like it was inspired by or even ripped off from Annihilation. That got my attention because I loved Tanis. I still do. And if something existed that was similar enough that people would make this comparison or accusation, it's probably something that I would like. I've never heard the creator of Tanis speak about Annihilation or answer to that accusation, if ever it has been levied directly at him. I can honestly say that having listened to all of Tanis and read Annihilation several times, there's almost nothing that's the same about them, save for there being a discrete geographical area where some unusual phenomena occur. There's little else that one could find in common. But whatever the people who made the comparison saw that I don't, I'm glad they did, because it led me to this book. I got a used copy, and I read it. I loved it. I cannot emphasize enough how much I love this book. Something about it just fits me so very perfectly. There's something transcendent about it for me. I can fully admit that I don't know entirely why I like it as much as I do. Hopefully you've all had that experience where you encounter something that seems like it was created somehow, especially for you. I've listened to the audiobook several times as well, and I think it's excellent. So if you enjoy audiobooks, I do recommend it. When highly recommending a book or movie to someone, I often discourage them from looking it up, lest something important gets spoiled. I bought a copy of Annihilation to loan to others, and I blacked out the blurb on the back with a Sharpie because I felt that it divulged too much. I might be a little too crazy in that regard. Some people don't mind spoilers, but I want to support those who do. I will say a few things about it, though, for the sake of you knowing even vaguely what the story is about. Annihilation takes place in an unnamed coastal location. As I said earlier, there's a specific region of land where unexplained things happen. In the story, this small region of land is called Area X. There's an organization that's studying it called the Southern Reach, and they send in small teams of people to explore the area and document their findings. The main character of this book, a biologist, is a member of one such expedition. And that is all I'm going to say. Just read the book. It's only 200 pages long, and if you can't afford it or find it, just email me and I'll send you a copy. I could end there. If only I could end there. Annihilation is the first book in a trilogy, referred to as the Southern Reach Trilogy, due to the overarching presence of the organization that is involved with researching Area X. The second book is called Authority, and the third book is called Acceptance. I must emphasize, though, that Annihilation stands completely on its own. You can have an entirely satisfying experience reading just the first book in this trilogy. The way Annihilation ends gives me straight-up chills every time I experience it. And I'm only urging you, dear listener, to read the first book. What you do thereafter is not my business. I do want to remark briefly, though, on the other two books. If you read and thoroughly enjoy Annihilation, I definitely recommend that you continue with the series. The second book, Authority, is considerably longer, about 360 pages compared to Annihilation's 200. The pacing is slow but deliberate. It's justified, which is all I can say without spoiling anything. A huge bonus for anyone that listens to the audiobook is that this one is narrated by Bronson Pinchot, and he is fantastic. The third book is similarly long to the second, but I found that it reads much quicker. There are roughly 3 different perspectives that it switches between. All of them are set in different times. It's basically the payoff for coming this far. 3 different people narrate the audiobook as well, which gives these different principal characters that much more a life of their own. Bronson Pinchot happily returns, as does the narrator of Annihilation, someone named Carolyn McCormick, and also featured is the great Exie Sands. If you know her, you know her. And I could end there. If only I could end there. Because I liked the book as much as I did, I looked it up on Wikipedia to see what I could learn about it that I might find interesting. And much to my surprise, I learned that it had been made into a movie already. And said movie was actually still in theaters, but almost gone and not playing around where I lived at the time. It was simultaneously very exciting and very disappointing. I wasn't going to drive a couple hours to see it. I could just wait for a physical or Netflix release. I don't remember the details of how I first saw the movie, but I do remember the experience. Let me back up and say that this book feels entirely unfilmable. A substantial portion of the text is narration as opposed to dialogue between characters. And unless the director opted for a feature-length voiceover, it would have to be different. And different it is. I was thrilled to discover that the movie was written and directed by Alex Garland. Garland has written books and movies that I loved, including a novel called The Beach, as well as the movie 28 Days Later. He's written and directed 2 movies that I've seen multiple times apiece, Ex Machina from 2014 and later, Men from 2022. And I want to note that as I write this, because I do write out what I say in this podcast, as I write this, I've not read or seen any interviews or encountered any information whatsoever about Alex Garland's adaptation of Annihilation. I don't even know why, given that I like the book as much as I do, and I definitely enjoyed the movie, but I simply haven't sought out any information about it. I'll probably do so after I finish this, because now I'm thinking about it. It will likely shine a light on where he was coming from with this whole thing. But in the interest of time, I'm going to restrict all this to my personal experience. The film version of Annihilation has so very little in common with the book. And I'm fine with that. They can be separate things. As I said, this book feels basically unfilmable. So instead of attempting the near impossible, Garland seems to have made an almost completely original movie inspired by the book. Some details persist. There is still an Area X. There are still expeditions. The main character is still a biologist. There is still a lighthouse. There are 1 or 2 other similarities, but that's really about it. If I had needed this movie to be the book brought to screen, I would hate this movie with the burning passion of a trillion suns. But it is so entirely different and distinct, there are virtually no comparisons to be made. If you've seen Blade Runner and read the book it was based on, think along those lines. There were a few disappointments for me, choices that I wish had been different, but I've seen it several times, and the more I just ride the ride that it is, the more enjoyable I find it. I do like the movie, a lot. I'll just never know what it's like to see it with no context. Do I like it because it's connected with the book that I love, or does it really stand alone and on its own strengths? I think in the year 2018, Obama said it was one of the favorite movies he saw that year. So there's that. The movie gets a 67% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes and a nearly identical score on IMDb. Okay, but not great, right? The book, however, has a 4.5 star out of 5 on Storygraph. That would equal a 90% rating. I can't speak to how polluted Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb are by bots and trolls, so take those data points with a big grain, one way or another. Annihilation's not my favorite movie by Alex Garland, but I think it's definitely good and well worth watching. Just have as few expectations as possible and let it be what it is. And I can end there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Chet Airliner podcast. Please leave any questions, suggestions, or spoiler-free thoughts about Annihilation that you may have in the comments below. Have you seen the movie but not read the book? If so, what did you think of the movie? Have you read anything else by Jeff Vandermeer? I don't want to draw this out any longer or dwell in the negative, but strangely, I've more or less given up on everything else I've tried to read by Vandermeer, with the exception of the Predator book he wrote that I'm about halfway through right now. I think it's great. I've just been unable to get into anything else he's written, despite multiple efforts, which makes this book trilogy that much more interesting to me. There is just something about Area X.